key ones really that a lot of customers come to first off will be around future sales and the material planning. So future sales, there's two sides to that, and it's looking at historical trends to give you a prediction of what you should change your minimum stock levels for those various different warehouses, and then dynamically update those. So then when you run material planning, which looks at the big picture, so any orders that you've got outstanding on the system, so where there's demand for purchasing stock, where you've got purchase orders coming in as well. But essentially, you've got a stock balance and ordering enough to keep you at or above that minimum level. So I mentioned we'd start with the future sales, and there is two sides to it, but I'm going to just begin with the minimum stock. So I'm actually going to filter this for a product group. And if I click on display, what that's now doing is that's just analyzing all of the stock items in that particular product group. I mean, I could have run it for all of the stock, but just for speed today. And it's looking at each of the stock items. If it's got multiple warehouse locations, you're going to see it listed in here multiple times. And it's just analyzing. And if we look at the columns at the moment, it's looking at the last rolling 13 weeks monthly average. And it's based on usage, and I'll explain that a little bit more. For those of you who have seasonal trends, you can enter a date range here. So rather than look at just the last rolling 13 weeks, it would look at the historical range there. What do I mean by this? If I was starting to look to order for the summer now, I could put in the 1st of July to the 30th of September 2020, and it's going to analyze our usage during that period. So now it's displayed all that information, and ideally we're looking for the big swings. So for example, we've got current minimum stock level of 100, and actually if we look, we've not had any usage for that particular item for the last 2 years. So the system's suggesting we change that minimum stock level to 0, so essentially we buy to order. If we don't, and we run MRP, and perhaps we get that one order where a customer wants to buy 10, well, actually, when we run this, because we haven't got enough stock, even regardless of somebody not wanting to buy, because it's going to try to keep you back to or above that minimum level, it's going to suggest that we buy some of, I think that's our crackers in this example here. So let's change it to 0. If I switch it the other way, we can see, for example, let's go for this one here. We've had a bit of an increase in terms of the sales or the usage of our espresso cups, and the system's suggesting we amend the minimum level from 0 to 371. Now, I'll talk about how it's worked out the calculation in a moment, but what we can also do is click on the blue hyperlink, and this is going to bring up Sage's monthly trading figures, but we've enhanced that. So for the sales analysis, we give you a graphical representation, so we can start to look at the phasing of that. Lost orders, I'll touch on. That's an element of stock management, so enabling your sales team to be able to record lost orders as they're tracking them, and you can choose which ones would then be included in this minimum calculation in order to ensure that we've got coverage in future. But the key one is usage, as I say, and usage is anything. So where you've dispatched sales orders, it might be where you've done internal issues. For those of you manufacturing, that would be where you're consuming it in a bill of materials, for example. Now, with the rolling 13 weeks, that's great. I can see there's a bit of phasing, but this is why if I click on the last 2 years, I can then start to have a look and see, okay, actually, we do have those regular hockey sticks. So that does match that particular trend. But the most important thing here, in my opinion, is we're not automatically updating. There is no substitute. I've spent 3 years forecasting revenues for a FTSE 100 company many years ago. And the thing I learned there was the data is great for being able to analyze, but there's no substitute for experience and that kind of human aspect. So how it's worked the calculation out is as follows. So the demand is usage plus lost orders if you've purchased the stock management piece and people are recording that. And that gives us our average demand for the month at the moment in that 3-month period or the date range. In the background of the system, I've set 21 working days in the month, gives us our average daily demand. The lead time from the preferred supplier is 5 days, gives us a safety margin that I've set in the background of 50%. So we're going to have a coverage of 7.5 days. And with all of that in mind, that's the minimum stock level that we should have in order to ensure that based on those analytics, we don't run out of stock. We can override that on the stock item or the supplier as well. So if you've got suppliers that are perhaps less reliable, you might want to increase that to, let's have 2 times the coverage. Whereas if they're more reliable, you might change that to 1.1. So let's have 10% extra. The final bit at the bottom is just having a quick look at your stock item balances. And again, we've enhanced Sage's balances screen here. So being able to give visibility of what's been allocated, what's on purchase orders that are yet to come in, even down to forward orders, so sales orders that we're yet to add or allocate stock. So what you would do, those that you want to update, you simply tick, or you could select all and you update. And what that's going to do is then amend the minimum stock level on the warehouses for all of those stock items. So that's the first part. The second part then is actually looking forwards. So within the material planning, which we'll come on to next, so which is another one of the elements there, you can add a manual forecast. So this would be where, so what the system's going to do is it's going to analyze the data that you've already got on there. So the minimum stock level, the lead time from your preferred supplier, any sales orders that are consuming stock, purchase orders that are going to increase stock that have yet to be received in. But for those of you who have your business development team perhaps speaking to your customers and they're giving you a forecast, but you've yet to receive the orders, you can manually add in a forecast, and material planning will include that. You can link it to a customer if you wish, but the date that you require it, what the stock item is, the quantity in the warehouse, and again, it will include that in, but you can import that via our template. It's just a 5-column CSV. So you can manage that in a spreadsheet and then import that in, and material planning is going to look at that. If, as I put on a sales order for an item that is in that forecast, as I save the line, it will also ask me, do I want to reduce the balance by the sales order that I've put on? So there's a bit of dynamic aspects. But if I come back into the sales order forecast, what this enables you to do is we can say, so over the last 12-month period, and I'll pick my espresso machine here. If I click on display, for each of the warehouses, it's showing me the sales over the last 12 months because that's the period I've picked. If I just select one of those and I click on generate forecasts, what we can do is we can say, let's increase that, and it's going to tell us based on that forecast change, what potentially the sales might be based on last year. As you generate that, what it does is it then just simply drops that, or drops all those elements into this forecast. So it gives you another way of working. In my experience, a lot of customers will still manage it outside of the system and spreadsheets and import it in, but that's a new utility that we added in the last release. So from a material planning perspective, just to save time, I ran this earlier in good old Blue Peter fashion. So I'll talk through what it's done at the moment. I've got about 6,500 stock items, and you can see there it took just under 2 minutes to run. Now we have tried to optimize it. It does depend on the speed of your server. Obviously the volume of stock items, if you've got 300,000, that's going to take longer than somebody who's got 3. But again, you get the idea. You don't have to kick anybody out of Sage. You can run this as many times as you want. But what it will do every time you run it, it will delete the previous suggestion. And then it's worked through all of the stock items and analyzing what we call the future stock movements, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. And what it's going to then bring back is all of that analysis. And the first one will be warnings. Now, because it's demonstration data, I've got a lot of data in the past, but we can see things such as purchase orders that may be overdue. So the purchase order is due in yesterday. It's not been received, or we've had no update from the office admin perspective. It's just going to tell us that that's been overdue. Or suggested purchase orders. So he's going to generate suggestions, might not arrive in time for, now I've got manufacturing switched on, so for works orders, but may not arrive in time for certain sales orders. And if you double click, what that's going to do is that's going to open the future stock movements, and you can see the orders that it's going to affect. I will touch on that a bit more. We've also got reschedule messages. We've kept it very simple, but if the demand changes, you might get a message to say that you could reschedule a purchase order. As we come over to these 3 tabs here, depending on the fulfillment method on your sales order, we will split the suggestions out. So for example, those where it's coming in from stock would appear on this list. Those where you've set the fulfillment to be direct from the supplier, the purchase order suggestions would appear here, and then supplier via stock in this particular one as well. And what we're doing is we're presenting this information to you so you can make those relevant decisions. So the first column is going to be the date that we need to place or create the PO. And depending on how far out you've got orders and forecasts, you will see dates out into the future. Now you could place them now, it's entirely up to you, but it's giving you a suggestion based on the lead time from your preferred supplier of when you should generate that order. We can see here the 15th, 10-day lead time, so we should have that in based on working days by the 29th. Again, you can change the date should you wish. And actually in the options, and there's loads of different options, I've grouped so anything where the suggestion, so a suggestion would be a sales order, for example, are within a week, just group it into one individual line. I've got some of the stock item details, the quantity the system's suggesting, and I can overwrite that. Again, I've got some choices there. Units of measure and which of our warehouses it's going to look to buy it into. Our current stock levels, our preferred supplier, but from the drop-down list, these two are suppliers set up on that particular stock record, but we do list the rest of your purchase ledger. As I always say in these demonstrations, I wouldn't not suggesting you can nip round to your local store to buy items, but if it's an emergency and you need to get them in and it's a supplier you wouldn't normally use, it means you can select them from your purchase ledger and generate a PO. There's the unit price, and again we try to use some logic, but I can override that, so you could group it by supplier and speak to them. But if you've got list prices, that's what we're going to pull through from the preferred supplier. If you haven't, then we'll try to use a live price from an open PO. I don't know if I've got one of those. Yes, I have. So the most recent PO, that's still open because that should be the most recent price. If not, your last buying price, and as a last resort, your average. And then finally, if we have a quick look on the end here, we've then got some of the reasons why. So I'll give it a couple of examples. Let's just double click on a couple of these. So the example here is we've got a minimum stock level of 5. We've got a usual order quantity. Now I've obviously got something switched off because it's suggesting oh no, there you go. I know exactly why, because we've got a usual order quantity of 30. So our opening balance is 20, and the system's quite happy with that because it's above the minimum. And we're only using free stock. So you might have more than that in stock, but because you've allocated it, we ignore it. You've already ring fenced it. You know that you're using that stock. I've got a works order because I've got manufacturing that's going to consume some stock and bring it back to 12. I've also got another one of our modules consuming those. So the trigger point here is it would bring us down to a balance of 4. 4 below is below 5. And we've got to order in multiples of 30. 34 is above our minimum level and the system's happy. Double click perhaps on another example here. What have we got down the bottom here? So minimum stock level of 5. We can order in eaches. Again, the balance is going down. We've got a purchase order. That's going to bring the balance up. But the suggestion is ordering 6 because that's going to bring us back to 5. Now, the actual suggestion would be somewhere up here. It's because, as I say, it's demonstration data. A lot of my items are in the past, and actually, if you ran a business this way, you wouldn't last long. So please don't judge me on that. But hopefully, you get an idea of how it's calculating. Now, if some of that's a load of rubbish, and providing you've got access to be able to amend stock items, rather than write it on a piece of paper and have to go away, what we can do is make some changes, perhaps to the minimum level or to the suppliers from within this list. Again, we also give you your stock item balances with those drill downs, stock at other locations, and the monthly trading figures as well. So you look through this, decide what you want to place. You can filter and just say, show me those that's where we need to create them this week or today. And you can select or select all, and those that you select, you then click on this create purchase orders button. It will then group them where they're from the same supplier for the same delivery address. If I was to select all and click on create, that will then generate me a purchase order or the appropriate number of purchase orders into purchase order processing, so I can then go and place those. And because those purchase orders are now in this future stock movements, when we rerun it, if we get some extra orders, it's going to take into consideration the balance that's coming in. There's one other alternative. Now you do have to filter it by a single supplier. And if I just select all there, and this was added in the October release. If we click on this button, what it does is it creates us a suggested purchase order. And the idea behind this is for those customers who especially with Brexit, you want to maximise the order that you're placing. So these are all the items the system's suggesting. But if we click on add new lines, we can also add other stock items just to fill out the particular purchase order. Alternatively, if you purchase the POP management module within the distribution piece and you utilize the quantity breaks within there, if I click down onto the highlighted, it will show you if there are any quantity breaks. We can then increase the quantity we're going to order and get a lower per unit cost as well. So that's the material planning aspect as well as the future stock movements.